Football Manager has been the undisputed king of management sims for years, but as we know, consistency plus lack of competition can breed complacency. So is that what we get with Sports Interactive's new Football Manager 22 release? For years, FM has treated us to gameplay so in-depth, you need a manager's license to get through like a day and a half. This formula has come to define the Football Manager series. So with the new title's release, I bet you're all wondering if Football Manager 22 is really for you. And that's what we specialize in here on Co-Founders Forgetting Cognition. So let's dive right into the game and answer the question, who is Football Manager 22 really for?
Yeah, take it away, Ernie. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
If you're a fan of the Football Manager series, you know the deal here. But if you're new, Football Manager is an incredibly detailed soccer manager simulator. You control everything from the way your squad lines up, to your coaching staff, to your youth teams, to your training schedule. Its single player and online modes, along with an extensive collection of mods and add-ons, means almost anything is possible. From taking control of a 4th Division amateur Andorran side to getting 17 friends and running the Bundesliga together. It's the most complete simulation of being a soccer manager there's ever been. So let's dive right into the meat of the question. Who is this game really for? Bear in mind, the criteria I'm going to list is just a checklist. It's not like you need to fulfill each one to like the game. So here's who Football Manager 22 is for. People who have never played an FM game before will find the most polished iteration in series history. And if you own Xbox Game Pass, you get this one for free, so you might as well pick it up anyway. So if that's what you needed to know, really glad we could help. But stick around as we break down FM22 in depth and we can really talk about why or why not it might be for you. So let's talk about the meat of the game. Of course, single player manager mode. Immediately as you load in, it feels exactly familiar. You pick your database, you get in, you either start unemployed. I do both. I did a save where I started in Germany with FC Cologne, and I did a save where I started as a 25-year-old kid with National C license, and I ended up in the Japanese 2nd Division. All of it feels very familiar. You get in, you meet your squad, you set your tactics, you hire your coaching staff, you do your scouting. It all feels like Football Manager. And that is both a major compliment and a major criticism. And I'll talk about that in a second. But one thing that I think Sports Interactive needs to be praised for here is the polish on this game. You're not finding bugs. I crashed once playing on PC, but I put in a dozen, 2 dozen hours. So, it does happen. That is something that as we've seen, given current major releases, you can't take for granted if a studio is really going to put polish in and make sure that you are experiencing the game and not the bugs or the glitches. And that's something that Sports Interactive has really done well here. One thing though that has to be said, and this is my major criticism with the game, how much is new here? And for me, it's just not that much. Let's get into what Sports Interactive touted as the new features of Football Manager. You can always tell whether a game is going to be really a major improvement on its predecessor by the marketing that the developer does. And if the marketing is touting some fairly minor changes, you can bet it's going to be a fairly minor change year to year. That's pretty much what we've got here. So the big thing that Sports Interactive was talking about is a new match engine. They said, well, the physics we've totally overhauled the physics and, we've made matches more realistic and all this. I don't see it personally. Now, look, Football Manager is not a game where you get in and you're watching a realistic soccer match. Maybe one day, but today that's just not why you play Football Manager, and we all know that. So there's a large degree of forgiveness that we give for weird things happening, players phasing through each other and things like that. And granted, that stuff does happen a little bit less with this new engine, but not significantly. You still get your classic, player stops on a dime and then just slides backwards so they can get to a ball. You get players running into each other. Sometimes they fall down. Sometimes one just goes right through the other. You get weird fouls happening, weird penalties happening, all this kind of stuff. Now, it's weird because Football Manager sort of exists, like on the one hand, the match is just a simulation of the way the two teams are playing. So there's times where I feel like, well, I can't really react too much to what the match is doing because it's not realistic. On the other hand, you are expected to make tactical changes during a match based on what you're seeing. So it does have to be realistic to an extent. And this new engine, it makes things a little better, which is why I said in the beginning, it's the most polished iteration of Football Manager there's ever been. But is it a big overhaul? I don't think so. In terms of being a manager, you now have a new tab on your manager screen for your data analysis hub. So this, again, seems more like a quality of life improvement. You get all of your data analysis, all of your sabermetrics, all of your statistics, all in one place, and then your data analyst will send you emails breaking down how your team is doing from a sabermetric standpoint and how the opponent is and all this kind of stuff. It's all really cool, but none of it's new. These are all things that I could have found earlier on. So I believe in FM20 they introduced the new expected goals statistic. So that's a big point of emphasis here. I still don't really get it personally. I don't think it really means that much. If you're an expected goals person, then this is here. But again, that we already had that. So things like mapping out all the teams in your league on a graph. How are you doing relative to the rest of the league in terms of your finishing, in terms of your tackling, in terms of your fouling, all that kind of stuff. Again, it's all cool, but all that stuff was already in the game. Now it's just easier to find all in one place, which I do appreciate, but is it a huge new feature that would be touted if this was a release every 3 years? I don't think so. And finally, there's the new transfer deadline day interface. This was pretty cool. I do think that transfer deadline day is something that FM has needed to improve for a while, because especially the summer deadline day, it feels like a huge deal. There's all kinds of stuff happening. You never know when that next transfer deal is going to go through, what that big surprise is going to be. And it's something that actually FIFA Career Mode nailed for a number of years, mostly because the rest of their transfer mechanics are not good. So by comparison, it seems excellent. But either way, it's something that I appreciate in Career Mode. And now it makes its way to Football Manager. So it's all really cool. You get emails from journalists. You get constant questions. I did a couple deals on deadline day. I mean, players and agents react differently knowing that a deal has to get done right then. I mean, it is cool. But again, it's not exactly a massive feature change. And on top of that, there's only 2 deadline days a year, and even winter is kind of scaled back. There's only one real transfer deadline day a year, so this isn't even something that you're going to be experiencing very much. All of that as a package means that there's just not a whole lot new added to the game. Let's talk about some of the other modes. You have Create a Team, that's back. It's cool. It is really cool that you get to go in and replace a team from any league you want with a team that you've created. It's a novelty, really. If you really wanted to get into it and say replace a whole league or a whole country or something like that with new teams, you can do that. You can get in and get into the weeds with the editor and really have some fun. And one of the big strengths of Football Manager, as always, is that editor is there. You can get in, you can mod the game. It's fairly easy to learn, and it's pretty much limitless, the possibilities. So Create a Team is more just a novelty if you want to be able to do it and just say, oh, I'm playing with my own team as opposed to, wherever it was that you were going to play. But, it really doesn't add that much to the experience. Fantasy Draft is back again. If you were actually interested in mixing up, doing a whole, countrywide or continent-wide or worldwide fantasy draft, you can do that in the editor. This fantasy draft is just something you do with friends. It's cool. It's cool for a few hours. I don't really think anyone who plays Football Manager is going to be playing this mode extensively the same way that you would play the single player manager mode. And finally, you get online multiplayer, which, again, I want to give all the credit to Sports Interactive. We cannot take this for granted anymore in current game development. Online multiplayer is polished. It's exactly what we need it to be. It has all the features that you want. So when you get in and you say, I want to play a Football Manager game online, this is what it looks like. And I love it because it really is exactly what you'd want it to be. There's no unnecessary waiting periods. You can set parameters. You can set turn limits, time limits for other players. You can open it up to the public. You can close it down. You can password protect your leagues. You can do all of this stuff. And you can host custom databases. So you can have a player get into the editor, make changes, host the game, and then people play it. You don't even need to have the host online in order for people to play. It really is a fantastic iteration of online multiplayer. And it's so much fun to get on and play with friends. So I have to commend Sports Interactive for really putting resources behind this and making sure the multiplayer component is exactly what players wanted and something that players will actually make use out of. So this is something that if you are a big multiplayer person, even if you're not a big manager simulator person, this might get you into this game. But I have to say, once again, this is not the first year that online multiplayer has been really good. So this is something that I played my first online multiplayer game in 2018 with FM22. So, this really, this is not a new thing for them. Which then brings us to the value assessment of this game. Is it actually worth the $55 you pay for it on Steam? Look, in terms of the replayability, in terms of the length of a game, I mean, it is limitless. You can play for however long you want. You can play for 20 years. You can play until you're playing with Messi's grandson if you want to do that. And I know people who have done that. All of that is still here. But how different is it really from FM21, FM20, FM19, FM18? You get the point. How different is it in any kind of real sense? It's really not that much different. There's not a whole lot of new stuff here. So to tell me that I have to pay $55 to get really some quality of life improvements, I think I can pass. I think I can pass without paying that $55, especially considering that you get people who are so engrossed in certain saves that they're doing. I have a friend who's been doing an FM save for 3 calendar years, like real world years. He's like 20 years in on the game. Do I have to go to that person? Do I have to go to him and say, you got to pay $55 to reset all of your progress and all you get is a roster update and a couple quality of life fixes? FM players get so engrossed, they don't need all of the bells and whistles and all of the features in order to have a good time playing Football Manager. And unfortunately, this year's title just really didn't do much to convince me that you should be paying another $55, especially if you already spent $55 last year. With such extensive mods and editors and all of this, it's not like a roster update really means much of anything in a game like this. Now, the smartest thing that Sports Interactive can do is make this free with Xbox Game Pass. That was a stroke of brilliance because it's one of those things that when I'm looking as a prospective buyer of Xbox Game Pass, seeing Football Manager there every year, it's a draw. It may not be the draw for most, but I think it's a draw for a lot of people to say, well, there's a lot of good stuff on here, plus I get Football Manager, I get the new release. So, look, I think that was a great decision from the minds at Microsoft and Xbox and Sports Interactive to go ahead and do this. So if it's free, then it's free. And again, it really is the most polished iteration of the Football Manager style that I have seen since I've been playing Football Manager games. And that's just on the PC. The Xbox version saw a bigger leap because they're new to developing on Xbox, so every year they learn more things relative to what they're learning developing on PC. But that makes the final verdict on a game like this really tough. If you grew up watching and rewatching IGN reviews, for example, of games like Madden ahead of their release like I did, then reviews of yearly sports games tend to sound like they come from people who have never even heard of the game they're playing before they started playing it. But at CFC, we don't play games that way. We know that no one plays a game in a vacuum. Some of you really haven't ever touched an FM title before. Some of you have played every year since the 2000s. So I'm not going to insult your intelligence by saying all the cool things there are about this game and then pretending it's the first game that's ever done those. Football Manager is a tremendously well-executed title, and Sports Interactive should be commended for at least managing to never take a step back. And again, in today's era of game development, that's asking a whole lot. But this year, they haven't exactly taken a step forward either, which is why the answer to our final question is very simple. Who is this game not for? If you own any of the last 3 FMs and you don't get this one for free with Game Pass, or you're engrossed in a save, it's not for you. It's really not significantly different from any of those 3 titles. And that doesn't take away from the quality of the game itself as a standalone experience, but it really makes you wonder if it's necessary to release games like this year after year after year. Thanks so much for watching, folks. If you're playing Football Manager or you want to know anything more from someone who's played a bunch of hours, both with previous titles and with this one, let us know in the comments. Let's talk about it. Other than that, subscribe to CFC for more content. We'll see you next time. We appreciate you.